In this video, I've got a button similar to the previous videos. This one happens to be colorized with the CSS style sheet to have a blue background. And when I click the button, you see that the background or the face of the button actually has the time now, and the seconds are moving, and we get PM. So we were able to use JavaScript to change our output of the time from a 24-hour format to a 12-hour format and indicate AM or PM depending on what actual time it is. And instead of 4 o'clock being 24-hour format would be 12 plus 4 would be 16, 25, 27. Instead, our JavaScript is going to ask some if conditions and make responses based on the truth or falseness of the if conditions. And then another thing that happens is we have this paragraph underneath the button, which initially is invisible, but after we click this button and call a function, it becomes visible and it shows a message. And this time we're pulling out of the date object today's date. Up here we're pulling out of the date object the hour, the minute, and the time, and at the bottom the date. So let's go over the HTML web page code first. 35.html. There's our doc type declaration. There's our opening and closing HTML tags. There's our opening and closing head tags. We have a link to an ICO file that gives us the smiley face in the browser tab. We have a title that shows up right next to that smiley face in the browser tab. We have a link to an external style sheet called style.css, which I've been using with all kinds of different demos. So all of these tags, classes, and IDs and elements are not necessarily being used in this one. Anytime I make a new style, I just add it to the bottom of this, and I just keep pointing to the style.css in the same folder. The last one I have in the head is a link that points to the script, the external script file that is named 35.js, which is going to go over the two functions that are created for this particular demo. One function is called clock, and that is going to give us this clock output here that's on the face of that button on top. And then we have another function called show date, and that function is going to display some words here that says today's date is, and then based on an array index it's going to pull out our date object items. The show date function is being called inside of the clock function. So when you look at the clock function right here, function clock, here's the opening curly brace, and right before we get to the end of that curly brace to end that function, we call show date. Then it calls the show date, and then all of the commands in show date occur. Now in the 35.html, you've got a button here, and the button is what calls the clock function. On click equals clock. So this button click is actually what gets the whole ball rolling. You click it, and then it comes in here to the external JavaScript, and it finds the function and it obeys the function, and right before it gets to the end of the function it calls show date, which looks for the show date function. It finds that, and then it obeys all the code inside of there. So what else did I want to go over? I am still linking to this external style sheet. That's why we have the blue button and the blue paragraph. But I'm going to show you the styles to that, and then I'm going to misspell the external style sheet so that we could just, instead of focusing on bright colors and maybe obnoxious buttons, I'm going to show you what this looks like with no style at all. By misspelling the external style sheet, these styles will go away. But first, let me show you what styles it is picking out. We have in our style sheet, obviously we have a body. I'm not using the wrapper tag. I'm not using the H2. I am using ID of demo 2, and I am using this is also ID of demo 2. This is giving me a shared set of styles that all of these names will use. And for any button, no matter what background I'm going to use, or any, let me make sure demo. No, demo is for paragraph. No matter what name I use to identify the paragraph, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, it's going to have this paragraph right here that you see that's currently at the bottom that says today's date is July 9th, 2016. It's going to have a margin of 0 pixels, a padding of 2%, a color of white, so you can see the white text on the blue background, font size of 20 pixels, text align center, and display none. This display none is why when I refresh the page and it first starts, you don't see it. So it actually makes the paragraph invisible in the beginning. This demo 2 or ID of demo 2 or class of demo 2 gives it its exclusive background color. This basically gave us margins and text aligns and display and padding and color of the text, but this gives us our individualized background color. So for demo 2, whether it's ID or class, we have a background color of blue, a border of 5 pixels blue outset. Now if I were to change that to demo 1, I would change the background color of my button to green with a border of 5 pix green outset, so on and so forth. Okay. So those are those two styles, and the body has a margin 0 pixels, auto and padding 0 pixels. I am not using any of these tags, left, middle, right, or other. I'm not using left 3, middle 3, or right 3 tags. I'm not using those. I'm not using demos with Z's in the middle, demos or demos 1, 2, 3. I am using the style for a button. Any button that I create, whether it has an ID or not, a special ID or not, is going to have a width of 100%, a margin of 0 pixels, a padding of 5 pixels, a font size of 16 pixels, and a border radius of 20 pixels. Border radius is going to give me a rounded corner if it has 20 pixels. If it has 50 pixels, it's even more rounded. If it has 10 pixels, it's moving toward a little bit more pointy. Let's see, my button, I have an ID of B. So if I look in the style for £B, I'm using this style. This is for the button, I'm sorry. The other things, the demos were, if I click this button, we're stylizing the paragraph down here. The £B is what's stylizing the button right now. So if I change this right here, button IDG, it'll change this button to green. And go back to the style. If I change it to IDP, it's going to have a background of purple, O a background of orange, Y a background of yellow, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's that style that I'm using. I am using a list item. The list items, when you see right here, it says display the time on the button face, and number 2, show a hidden paragraph and display a message in it. This is actually the list item style. Now I originally had a margin bottom of 5 pixels, and then I Z'd it out so that it would bring these list items closer together. So I can just take that off. Just to show you, I could give it a background color of yellow, and let's see what that does. Give it my list item a background color of yellow. There you go. Now you see the list items. I don't really think I like that, so I'm going to take that back off, but at least that shows you by color where my list item element is on the page. So I did use list item. I did not use any of these. I did not use a highlight tag. I do not have an A link hover. OL and UL. I am using a UL, or no, an OL for an ordered list tag. That says margin left 50 pixels. If I X this out, let's see what happens. So I'm going to misspell the margin left style, and let's refresh this, and you see how my my ordered list moved over to the right some. I want to move it back to the left, so I'm going to let it go back to the margin left negative 50. When you give it a negative value, instead of moving away from the left, it's actually moving toward the left more, and that is by 50 pixels. I'm not using a table. I'm not using a table header or table data cell. I'm not using wrapper 1, and I'm not using left 1. So the only things that this external style sheet is using is what I've put the dots here. So basically what's going to happen when I misspell the name of this style sheet, which is box.css, the only thing that the page is going to use is whatever the browser's default values are for things that are standard like body. These things that are specialized, the names that I created, the browser isn't going to create any styles for those because it's not a standard browser tag. It's something I came up with. The button, whatever a normal browser button looks like, when this style is gone, it will no longer have a width of 100% and it will no longer have this font size. It's going to have the browser's decision. So what I'm going to do, I already showed you how this ran once. I click it. We get the time with the seconds that are actually dynamic, they're moving. We get a PM or an AM, and we get today's date. And this is what it looks like styled. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to misspell my link to my style sheet by throwing in a couple Z's in front of it. I do not have an external style sheet called zzstyle.css. So since that's misspelled, it will not properly link. So now when I click refresh, this is what a normal button looks like without any style. Alright, so that's what we're going to work with. Same thing down here at the bottom. I showed you the button, and the P with an ID of demo 2. No longer is it going to be colored when I click this button. No longer is it going to have a background of blue and be this big blue square. It's just going to basically spit out the data. Now, when I click refresh, you cannot see the paragraph at all. It has a style of display none. If I Z this out and click this, okay, you see the dashes that are, all these dashes right here that are inside the P tags. I'll refresh it again. I made the dashes a little bit bigger. You actually, what this is telling me is that my paragraph element is visible. It's displayed. Now if I take these dashes off and save it, now look at how far away the bottom of this field set line is to the button. Let me see now that I've taken those dashes off if that will pull this up or not. And it actually does, because putting anything in the P tags is going to allocate some space around it. So it's going to force space around it so that the text isn't crammed straight up against the button. Well, what I want is this P tag to have a style of display none. So when I click, I made sure that style is spelled correctly. It's given display none. Let me do this. Now there's no space there. You cannot see what's inside of the paragraph tag. The paragraph is truly being hidden with display none. It is not displaying. It's as if I deleted this and it wasn't even there. But it really is there, and what's going to make it show up is what we do in our JavaScript to this. And we'll see that part when we get to it. I just wanted to bring that up, why the style display none is going to make this paragraph completely unseen, whether you have something in the middle or not. The end of the field set, the end of the body, and the end of the HTML means there's nothing left. There's no other elements on this page. This is everything that we've got. But again, we do have a paragraph element there. You just can't see it right now because I set the display to none. Now let's go on ahead to the 35.js JavaScript file and go over these functions. Remember, when I click this button, it's going to call this function called clock. It's got an onClick event, button IDB onClick equals clock. It's calling the clock function. So we're going to go there. We're going to look at clock. Line 3, var time equals new date. What this line does is it creates a new date object, and then it's going to put that information into a variable with a name of time. But if I make an alert box, parentheses, semicolon, inside of the parentheses, put that variable called time there, I'm going to let you see what all information is in time. What all information does a new date object have? So let's refresh this and click this. This is all the information. It has the name of the day, which is Saturday. This is today, July 9th, 2016. The time is in 24-hour format. It's saying that it's 16 hours, 43 minutes, and 15 seconds, GMT 0400 Eastern Standard Time. I don't want all of that mess. I just want to pick out certain parts of the date object. So I'm going to click OK. And for some reason, this box keeps popping up. And so in order for me to make that stop, I'm going to take the alert box out of there. I just wanted to show you the alert box so that you knew what all information was in a date object. Now I have to refresh the page so that it'll refresh the fact that I took that alert box out of there. So now it's stopping. That is where these three new variables that are created come in, because the only thing I want out of that long spew of information is I want the hours, and I'm going to use the dot operator and the method getHours. I want to show the minutes, so I'm going to use the dot operator getMinutes, and I want the seconds. Dot operator getSeconds. So what I do is up here in line 7, I create a variable, any name I want. In this case, I'm going to call it HR because it's standing for hours, and I'm going to use that object reference variable that I called time here, and I'm going to use it with a dot operator and the method. So it's time.getHours. Then I'm going to create another one, var min for minutes equals time.getMinutes. And lastly, I'm going to create a variable called sec for seconds, var sec equals time.getSeconds. So now each little piece of information that I want is going to get pulled out with its own individual name. And then we're going to be able to display it based on using that variable name that pulls out that little individual chunk. In line 11, we are creating a variable called AM/PM. var AM/PM equals, and we're setting it to a string PM, capital P and capital M with a space on either side. So originally AM/PM gets the value of this. Now in line 13, we're going to ask a bunch of if conditions about the HR variable. We got a couple of those, 3 of those, asking questions about the value of HR. Then we have 2 more, asking about the value of min for minute and asking about the value of sec for second. So the first one is asking if HR is less than 12. Well, if you remember when I opened this up in an alert box, the hour showed 14, the hour being 1400. We're not doing it in that type of time, but it's still, the computer is accessing this 4 o'clock as being 14, because after 12, after 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock is considered 13, 2 o'clock is considered 14. Wait, I think I just totally ruined that. Wait. Alert time. Because it's 4 o'clock right now, that should be showing 16 o'clock time. Let me run that again. Yeah, 1646. I'm sorry. The hour is 1600. Let me take that off again. And refresh. Wait, save and refresh. Okay, so because it's 14, it's not less than 12. So all of this and these curly braces will be ignored. AM/PM equals AM is not going to run. Therefore, AM/PM, the value of that is still going to be PM. It's going to go down to the next if statement. It's going to ask, is it greater than 12? Well, 1600 or 16 o'clock is 16 is greater than 12. So what it's going to happen is it's going to obey what's in these curly braces, and it's going to take the value of HR, which is 16 right now. It's going to subtract 12. 16 minus 12 is 4, and then it's going to take this equal and put that 4 right back into HR. So now the value of HR is 4 instead of 16. And that's what time it is. Right now it's 4:48 p.m. Based on my computer clock down here in the right bottom corner. The next question it's going to ask, it's asking again about HR being less than 10. And we've already established that no, HR initially is 16, so it's not going to follow this rule. But if it were, let's say it was 8 o'clock in the morning. What it would do would set HR to a blank space plus the value of HR, so that when it's writing it out in digital, it'll give a space. It'll line it up as if there were a 0 there. But instead of going down here and looking at this clock saying 04:48, it just moved it over a space so that it would be lined up a little more to the right instead of right over top of the date 7/9/2016. Well, I know we're not talking about this section right here, but basically that's what this is doing. If the number is for the hour is less than 10, we're going to give it a space, and then we're going to give it whatever that number is, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. That's only if the hour is less than 10. Now, if the minutes are less than 10, we are going to not just give it a space, but we're in fact going to put a 0 in front of it and then do the minutes. So right now it says 4:49. If that minutes were 4:09, you would see 4 colon and then a 0 and then a 9. So we're putting a 0 in front of any number that's only one digit. And we do the same thing to the seconds. If sec, the value of sec is less than 10, then sec is equal to a 0 plus whatever the number is less than 10. Okay, so there's all the if conditions that will give us the nice readout, the nice way that we want to see the time displayed. Now we've got b.innerHTML. Now, even though the ID of B is not accessing a style with our external style sheet, because I misspelled the name of the style sheet in the head in the link right here, we're still using the ID for the functionality. Our function is using it. It is looking for some element with the ID of B, and in this case it's the button, and it's taking that and using the dot operator and the inner HTML, and it's setting that equal to whatever the value of HR is, and it's adding a colon to that, and then it's adding whatever the value of min for minutes is, and then it's adding a colon to that, then it's adding whatever the value of sec for seconds is, and then lastly it's giving us the value of AM PM, that variable, which in this case it's going to stay PM, because the only way that it would change to AM is if the value of HR, the value of the hour, were less than 12. Less than 12 in the 24-hour format, because in the 24-hour format, 12 would be noon and 0 would be midnight. Or actually 24 would be midnight, and then after 24 you'd be going into 1 o'clock in the morning, and so on and so forth. Alright, so we did line 29. Line 31, this particular line of code right here, when we click the button, it allows the seconds to be dynamic and move an increment every second. Set timeout. We call the name of the function, which is clock. We have a comma, and then we have 1000, which I guess that's 1000 milliseconds. Every 1000 milliseconds, the second will move up an increment. Now, if I comment that out with 2 forward slashes, save it, refresh the page, and then click the button, now you see a static time, 4:52:23 p.m., and the 23 is not moving anywhere. Okay, so if that's how you want your code to just give you a time stamp, when something happens, you just want a time stamp. For instance, this gave me a timestamp of when I clicked the button. Then that's how you would do it. If you want to see a dynamic clock where the seconds keep ticking, then you want to have this. Set timeout, clock, comma, 1000. So we do this, click it again, 59, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we've got a dynamic real-time value showing on the page. Then right before the end of the function, the end of the function's ending curly brace, we call the next function. We call showDate. So then it's going to look for the function showDate on this page, and here it is. It happens to be next. We only have 2 functions here. If I had 12 functions here, the call of this function would look all over the page for the keyword function and the matching show date name. But like I said, this happens to be next in line, and so it's going straight to it. var date equals new date. So now we're creating yet another date object, but up here we created the date object and gave it the name time, because we basically were revolving our code around time. Here we're going to revolve our code around date, so we're giving it the name date to make life easy for us to remember. var date equals new date, and again, I don't want to spit out all of the information that the alert box would show for the date object. I only want to pick out pieces that I want to pick out. So here, var year, this is a new variable, we're calling it year, equals, we're using the name date that we created for the date object, we're using the dot operator, and we're going to call the method, we're going to use the method get year. Here we have an if condition, and it's asking, and I don't know how to explain this, and I didn't look up how to explain it, so I'm just going to say the code because I know it works, and I'm going to call it a day. But if year is less than 1,000, then you will take whatever the year is, and you're going to add 1900 to it, and then you're going to put that value back in year. Well, we're in the year 2016, so I don't know how to explain that. If I were to take my calculator and hit 2016 and subtract 1900, I get 116. If I were to take, let me see, did I do that right? If I were to take the year 2016 and subtract 1900 from it, I get 116. So yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but like I said, it works. It's showing the correct year as being 2016, so I'm not gonna Why would the year be less than 1,000? I don't even know why the code even gave us this if. Let me see what happens if I just comment that whole if condition out, because I don't understand it. So let me save it. Let me refresh it. Let me click it. Now look how strange that is. Today's date is July 9th, 116. That's not giving me the right date. So for whatever reason, I need this in here. So if I ever figure it out in a future tutorial, I'll bring up what this means. But until then, I'm just going to use it because I see that it works. Okay, so yeah, that was horrible. Now we're going to create an array, because if you remember from previous videos, the get month, the date object get month or get date is going to give us a numeric value. And in order for us to convert a numeric value to a string of text, we need to create an array that has indices. January is index 1 of this array called month array. January is index 0 of month array. February is index 1 of month array, all the way to July being index 6. And so therefore we're going to create this array. Var month array equals new array. We're going to name all of these strings of text that we want to be able to utilize, and we're going to enclose them in double quotes and separate them by commas. And we're going to use this month array in a minute down here in line 52, but we're not in line 52 yet. Line 50 we're going to do first, because we're going to be working with this paragraph down here. I already had some information show up on the button, but now I'm going to have different information show up on the paragraph. So the first thing we have to do is make this paragraph visible, because initially we created it to be invisible by saying display equals none. So we're using the document.getElementById, and we're pulling out that demo2 ID for that paragraph. We're using the dot style, then dot display, and we're setting that equal to block. So now it's going to be a visible element on the page. Then the next thing we're going to do, and this is where we're going to take advantage of this month array and the array elements, which are months. We're going to take demo2.innerHTML, and we're going to set that equal to this text string that says today's date is, plus month array, and then the index is what's inside of these straight brackets. So we're going to use that date, the name date that we created way up here for the new date object, dot get month. And remember, it's going to give us a numeric value. Date get month is, because it's July, is going to give us a number 6. So month array with an index of 6 is what this is now, is going to take us to the word July. So the value of month array date.getMonth is going to give us in a roundabout way the word July, plus a space, plus date.getDate, which is going to give us the 9th, because today is July 9th. Then we're going to add a comma and a space, plus the value of year, which we came up with year over here when we did this if condition. If year is less than 1,000, then add 1900 to it and put the value back in year, which is what ultimately gave us the year 2016. So then there's the end of that function. Now, this window.onload.clock I have commented out. I take off the comments, save this, and run this. And as you can see, because window.onload is calling the clock function up here, it's actually running everything in the clock function, and then at the end of the clock function, before it's over, it's running the show date function. So it's actually causing all of this code, both functions, to load before anything else happens. And so that's why the paragraph down here is visible. It actually gives us the output, and the button actually gives us the time that is running dynamically right now. If you want your page to run like that, then you go on ahead and put your clock function in your window on load event, whether it's if you go to body on load and call it here in your opening body tag, or you can do like they did here and just underneath all your functions just go on ahead and call it. You could do it that way. But I don't think that that makes sense with this particular demo, because I want to show you that it's the click of the button that causes all of this to happen. So I'm going to go on ahead and cancel that out by commenting it out, and I'm going to refresh the page again. So now I have it the way I want it. I want no paragraph to show at the bottom. I want the button to give you this, click this button for the time, and everything happens once you click the button. And with that, this is going to end this demo, and I'm going to read some for the next one.